Welcome to M01 Rocketeers, the podcast by Maria01, the Nordics' leading startup community. Join us as we embark on an inspiring journey to explore the possible, the plausible, and the preferable futures, alongside the brightest minds of the Finnish startup scene.
Welcome to M01 Rocketeers. This is Camilla.
And this is Sarita.
From the Maria01 team. Joining us today are Pasi Ilola, CEO at StarCart, and Tarmo Toikkanen, Senior Lead Programs at Sitra. Would you like to share a few words about yourselves?
Yeah, my name is Pasi, and I'm the founder and CEO of StarCart. And basically, I have a 30-year career in digital commerce behind me. Now, StarCart that I'm doing is an AI agent for e-commerce. So basically, it's a way to shop online with in the easiest way possible, so that whatever physical products you need, we'll find them for you and we'll buy them for you. 15 million products from over 1,300 stores.
Wow.
Cool. All right. I'm Tarmo Toikkanen, Senior Lead at the Data and AI program in Sitra. So Sitra is a future fund owned or run by the Finnish Parliament. So we are very neutral. Our mission by law is to help bring about a prosperous future for Finland. And we do foresight, we do experiments, and we scale societal innovations. And my work is focused on the sort of what can we do with data economy, and artificial intelligence.
Thank you. But first, let's listen to a story from the future.
Show me the money. What if you could get paid for watching ads? Not just any ads, but ones that are carefully tailored to your tastes, needs, and interests. Ads that inspire, uplift, and even entertain. If you're one of the savvy consumers who opted to pay for social media to gain control over your data, you're probably used to an ad-free experience. And in today's world, where most apps are interoperable, you only need one platform to stay connected with your friends. You might even be paying for every piece of content you consume based on recommendations from your AI agent, be it news, entertainment, or education. But with fewer ads in your life, have you noticed you're missing out on some of the latest trends and innovations? What if you could change that and get paid in the process? Here's how it works. Ask your AI agent to connect to the free TD2C app, a platform backed by the European Commission's Trade Department. Its mission? Supporting small and medium-sized European businesses while keeping your personal data secure. Once connected, your AI agent can start negotiating with sellers' agents, letting them know you're interested in earning money by engaging with their ads. You'll receive only the most relevant and inspirational ads, carefully selected by your agent. The more time you spend watching, clicking, and engaging with these ads, the more you'll earn. Even if you're not a big spender, the cash flow keeps coming. And the best part? You're in control. Your agent will only show ads when you want, whether you're shopping for robotaxi services or the latest beauty products. Instead of simple listings, you'll enjoy immersive experiences, interactive videos, VR demonstrations, and creative advertorials. Because your AI agent selects ads based on what's most relevant to you. Companies can only reach you by offering genuinely high-quality products and services. No gimmicks. No third parties. No manipulation, just true value. Plus, your personal data remains completely private and never shared with third parties. Get inspired, stay in control, and start earning. On your terms.
What were your first thoughts after listening to the story?
Actually, I was thinking that if you just replace the word ad with product, it sounds like Pasi's business.
Yeah, more or less. I was actually thinking about the same things. Like, I'm not sure about the ad angles that you pointed out in the story, but I'm a firm believer in this AI agent model for transactions. So like whatever you want to buy online, whether it's physical goods or services, somebody to renovate your house or babysit your kids or, doctor's appointment or an eye surgery. I firmly believe that the AI agent model of commerce is the way to go, because like we are now experiencing this at StarCart for physical products, and I gotta tell you, like it's like magic. Like when you find the products and you get them, with one button at the cheapest possible price, it saves you so much time that I have a hard time believing that this wouldn't be the model with which we do all commerce in the future. Because why wouldn't you do that? Like as a consumer or a business, like if you have an AI agent that can do all the heavy lifting of buying, like comparing products or services and then doing the actual transactions, then why would you not do that? So that's one part of the story that I firmly believe in.
And I think actually the sort of the AI agent model is interesting in the sense that it's probably going to change the advertising landscape quite heavily, in the sense that then those resellers can't really advertise that much anymore if the AI agent is anyways looking for the product from the different places. Like we've been talking that you're using kind of those very many different stores where you buy the products from. So it's not always just the most well-known stores, for example. So whether the advertising business will then go more towards like brands advertising their products in some ways.
Yeah, I think that's very possible, and it's actually probably probable that that's going to happen. Like there's all this talk now that our websites in the future are going to be built more for the agents than for humans, and I actually think that that's a probable future. That we will see this future where you have this like agentic layer on top of every piece of commerce on the web, which is going to be driving much of the transactions and which the people are going to be transacting with. Now, the question is that who are going to be those layers, and that's going to be a huge competition. Like, is it going to be like the AI chat agents, like, ChatGPT and, Perplexity, or is it going to be Google, or is it going to be us to some extent, or, who's that going to be? I think that's going to be the major battleground of the future.
Yeah, I mean, it sort of sounds like stuff that's already been done. I mean, web commerce sites for the last decade have understood that adding certain metadata makes their products appear better in Google search. So they do that. Similarly, I believe, at some point when you're big enough, if you, publish, these are the specs, using these on your website will make your products more prominent on our platform.
Yeah, that's true. Like the one thing that's missing right now from most of the services is the actual purchase part. Like Anthropic just released their agent platform like a couple of weeks or a month ago. And one of the key limitations that they listed that they don't actually do transactions, that the agent just searches for things, but they don't actually transact. But I think that's going to be the next thing. So like doing the transaction end to end with actual money is obviously the key thing. If you don't include that, then. But right now, like even with the massive amounts of funding that Anthropic has, they haven't done it end to end like we have. Just wanted to point that out.
And the focus has really been very much on data. Like you were saying, that there's been so many of these like trackers being implemented, and kind of how the different tools are able to track where the user is moving on the site and all that. But it's more about the data, not so much about the transaction.
That is true. Like the whole web commerce, like online commerce, everything has been based around collecting data about consumer, interactions and then promoting that. The whole Google model is basically based around that. And now, obviously, the next question for the web is that, as you also pointed out, that how is the ad model going to change? Where are you going to advertise your products or services, and can you advertise? And I think that's completely open still. I'm not sure about the whole earning for looking ads model. Like we've seen that tried many times in the past. I'm not entirely sure about that. I'm also not entirely sure about social media being, driven by subscriptions instead of ads. I think, in all likelihood, we're still going to have like an advertising landscape, in the future. It's just that the services that we might be advertising in might be different. So it might be less Google and more other players.
Yeah, it's a lot depending on the private data, whether we're going to continue with this model or change it somehow.
But I think the challenge with like kind of earning with watching ads as well is that, of course, the advertisers want to reach the very high value customers. And then would you have all the high value customers as the people who are watching the ads? So that's maybe a bit of a harder kind of a nut to crack.
Yeah, I guess one lesson learned, I think it was about a year ago or 1.5 years ago, when Apple sort of restricted the visibility of their user profiles to advertisers. And the result was that advertisement targeting was not as good. And that meant that advertisers weren't willing to pay as much. So prices went down, and that allowed, how should I put it? Well, less professional advertisers to come into the market. And the end result was that iPhone users started seeing crappy ads on their phones due to Apple's privacy restrictions. So there's like these follow-on effects that perhaps they didn't anticipate.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. Like the whole Apple's ask to track thing, basically led into a massive decline in the mobile gaming space. Like if there was one area or one vertical where, they were relying a lot on mobile advertising was gaming. And also in Finland, a lot of the games companies were extremely good at marketing and targeting their ads towards the right people. And then when Apple kind of like pulled the rug from out of the data gathering, the mobile games businesses are now in decline or like having to reinvest heavily into coming up with other ways of advertising. Personally, this might sound weird, but I'm not against the collection of personal data for advertising purposes. I actually enjoy having ads which are targeted towards me, but I might be in the minority. I think that the majority of people are heavily against this, that, the way, companies such as Google collect all the data from your Chrome surfing behavior and your, Google Ads clicking behavior and just have this massive pools of data. But honestly, I'm not sure if that's going to go away. I think that, we might see new entrants coming in, but I'm not sure if that is going to go away, and I'm not sure if that should go away.
If you consider that your personal AI agent would kind of hold on to your private data and not share it as such, then it could also use like more private data or more like sensible data to actually gain even more specific hyper targeting.
There is a possibility if we add this agent layer between the service or product providers and yourself, then perhaps this agent layer will then be able to, retain your data.
Yeah, kind of anonymize it in between.
Perhaps, but we haven't seen anything like that yet. So that's still open. Like, will that actually happen, or?
And will it actually hold? I mean, I can imagine. Google's advertisement, they also do that to an extent. That my profile is actually, it's just a pseudonymous identifier that's shared with the ad network and the advertisers, and they don't know more about me than what they're supposed to know. But at some point, if I do click through an ad and actually make a purchase, there's my personal information, there's my credit card, and there's all that. And outside of the EU, it's perfectly legal for companies to collect all of this information and sell it to each other as much as they want.
The whole issue of the gathering of personal data, I think, is a very thorny one. I don't think that there's any clear suggestion. I know that there's been many initiatives where people are trying to set up like this my data and whatnot, but none of those have flown. There's no initiative that actually allows for the consumer to control the use of their data in any way. And actually, my personal belief is that companies such as Apple are, in a sense, this might also be an unpopular opinion, that they're actually slightly overdoing it. Because Apple is so focused on, having the phone and the devices be private that they're actually shooting themselves in the leg when it comes to using AI, because they're using all the AI computing is being done, or most of it is being done on the device instead of in the cloud. And they're so cautious that if I were at Apple, I'd be wondering, is the competition going to pass me by? Because they're so privacy focused that, they're not using the power of the cloud at all, because they don't want to spread the private information anywhere.
But I think that was a topic that we discussed some episodes back as well, that one of the bigger problems with personal data is often that people typically don't understand kind of how it's gathered and where it's going to be used. Because I agree with you, Pasi, as well, in terms of the collection of the data, that I think it's something that we can't really avoid as long as we live in this kind of a market model in which we're in. So even if we would have these personal AI agents, somebody would still be the company that there would be a company that owns these agents as well. So then that company would have some access to that data, even though it would be your personal one. So in that sense, it would be a bit kind of complex to imagine that is not ever used for anything.
Yeah, Pasi, do you consider you're sort of providing that personal AI agent to a consumer? Yeah. So are you the third party in the transaction, or are you the first party, and is the store the third party? Where do you see yourselves?
Well, strictly speaking, legally, we just facilitate a transaction between the consumer and the store, so that we're not a reseller, if that's what you're asking. But I think that's a very good question. We operated with a model that, as far as we know, nobody has done anywhere up until now, with the same model where we use these agents to buy goods on websites on behalf of consumers. We haven't seen an execution like this anywhere. So obviously this has been a struggle to basically even describe that business. What do we call this? And and it's a constant discussion with our consumer customers when they come to the site and they're like, so who's selling this? And, sometimes the merchants are a bit confused. So like, are you reselling us? And how can you do this without our permission? And we're like, no, we just forward orders.
Like a bit like a personal shopper service.
Yeah, exactly. So it would be like in the physical world, it would be similar to you hiring some kind of, like a physical agent, like a person to do your shopping for you. But like, I think the terminology even for this kind of business is still open. What do we call these kind of businesses? Like the AI agent label is actually the first way of describing our business that we've found that is now, understandable by most of the public, or at least, the people in the tech space, like perhaps not the mass customers, but like it is a completely new field. And I think, there's a lot that we still need to learn as a society, that how is this exactly going to work? But having said that, I think that, we're going to see an explosion of these AI agent type businesses and operators such as ours in the next years, because it just makes so much sense. If the computer can do some of your daily tasks for you, then why would you not let the computer do that?
Yeah, if they are the more boring, laborious ones.
Yeah, like when we started StarCard, it started from when I was trying to buy jogging shoes. It took me an hour and a half, even though I knew exactly what kind of shoes to get. And I was like, why do I need to do this myself?
And does your company do like proactive recommendations?
Yeah, for sure. Yes, based on the data gathered about the behavior and the purchase pattern of the users, and then comparing that with other users. So for sure, because that also increases, the level of customer experience. So it improves the customer experience. Like, the more better the recommendations for you, the happier the customers are. If the recommendations would be completely anonymous or like, non-personalized, then, people would not be as happy with the customer service, because they would be like, why are you trying to sell me women's clothes when I'm clearly, male and this kind of thing.
I guess in your trajectory, you are a platform and sort of becoming, well, at least aiming to become a larger platform. So, well, I don't know, this maybe goes into your product strategy, but, when at some point Nike or someone will approach you that we will pay you X to promote our products, what's your, or can you answer that?
That's a good question. We haven't faced that yet. We don't run any ads.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So because we made a conscious decision not to basically ruin our user experience the way, some of these services like Google and Amazon have done. Like when you search for anything on Amazon, especially on Amazon.com in the US, like the first page is just full of ads. It's just promoted products. And we felt that that's too much.
So you didn't start with the enshittification.
No. And we've had this discussion in theory of like, if we were to do any kind of ads, like what would we do? And I think the brand promotions could be one, but we want to do it in a way that actually doesn't ruin the UX, that would actually complement, the user experience on the service. And how that's going to manifest itself, I don't exactly know. Well, if you look at Amazon's business, like their ad business is actually like insanely large, and it's growing much faster than their core marketplace, like the actual e-commerce business. Like I think it's somewhere in the region of 50 billion a year already. And it's insanely profitable, obviously, because there's very little cost of sales, to that. So like the gross margins are huge. But there is this temptation of like, when you're like Google or Amazon or like Facebook, there is this temptation of like, running too many ads and, making too commercial. And then you kind of like start to lose the core of, why people actually use that service.
And I think that's really like kind of one of the reasons why, for example, some of these big players, they've introduced these sort of ad formats as well that seem a bit more like user-generated content. For example, when Instagram ads came out for the first time, they were in stories. They were kind of like, the recommendation was to make them look like as if they were real user stories. So then they would kind of disappear in there, but you would still see ads as well. So there's for sure going to be a lot of innovation being done for the ad formats as well and how those are portrayed.
Yeah, but that's true. Like that's probably the whole story format is the last big, innovation in online ads, in the entire ad space. And everybody started doing stories, like even LinkedIn. I'm not sure if they still have that, but even LinkedIn had stories at some point. And now in terms of social media, which was also mentioned in the story, like I think it's going to be really interesting. And now we're again in a situation where in social media also, like in the search engine and, assistant space, we're, seeing a lot of competition, which hasn't been the case for the last 20 years. Now all of a sudden we're in a situation where Facebook is going down, rapidly only being used by, old people. And then, Twitter or X has basically, is rapidly going down as well, at least based on the media reports. So like the usage is going down. I'm on Blue Sky and I'm on Threads now, for my news fix. And I think it's going to be also really interesting to see how the social, services landscape develops, because now all of a sudden, like, there's competition. And I think competition is always good, because then there's going to be innovation.
And with the EU's Digital Markets Act mandating platform interoperability with third-party apps, what changes do you foresee? Can people choose to stick to one platform and still message to their friends?
I would consider that it a good thing that people have choice on platforms and not just having one. Where Citra compared the DMA, so essentially this means that when Signal or Telegram or some other instant messengers demand WhatsApp that they want APIs and be able to send messages across, WhatsApp needs to say, yes, here are the APIs. We compare this to essentially GSM roaming back in 1990s. Back then, basically, European legislators said that, hey, dear telecom operators, you should allow people to place, mobile calls from other countries. And they said that, this is technically impossible. It cannot be done. And basically, do it anyways. And they did. And now we have roaming. And now nobody considers that to be anything weird. And it would actually be weird if we couldn't just place calls. And it's sort of a nice feature that I wouldn't have to ask Pasi, do you use Blue Sky? Oh, no. Oh, okay, sorry. How about Telegram? How do I connect you? But I could just text you, as they say in the United States. I'll just text you, and it doesn't matter what you use or what I used. Things would just work. I mean, that's the beautiful future. How we'll get there or when is, of course, another question. But that's sort of what's behind the DMA there, because it's just silly that these instant messaging systems aren't talking to each other. There's really no good consumer service coming out of that.
I think that's a really interesting analogy, because like I wasn't thinking of GSM. I was actually talking about this with some people online like a couple of weeks ago, and I said that there hasn't been any open or distributed, messaging system on the net since, email, which was, invented sometime in the 70s, I think, So, but you're absolutely right. The GSM is actually like a successful, kind of like mandated implementation of like an open, communication platform. But, that's probably the last one, right? Mm-hmm. So since GSM, there hasn't been anything. So it's been decades that we've been building like, these siloed messaging spaces. And right now there still isn't anything. I'm not sure about this, the Fed space, or what is it called, the federated thing.
Yeah, I mean, there's protocols for doing activity pub and so on. So it could be done. There's no technical reason why it couldn't, but it just doesn't make business sense. So, and I guess that's it. When the market isn't providing good service, I guess that's when legislators need to step in and, place some rules.
But I think that's very interesting also from the point of view that, of course, if you compare like kind of the GSM world and how sort of straightforward the messaging was back then, I think we live in a much more complex world right now, that there's a lot more functionalities in these messaging apps and a lot more like kind of nuances for those. So it's going to be interesting to see kind of how these apps will then or will they start working together, because it's not as straightforward as maybe with GSM.
And is it only like messaging or maybe also content shared somehow?
Yeah, like the Twitter style status content and posts and, all of that. I think that's going to be but I think the GSM example is a good one, because like what happened with, the open mobile standards is that, for example, messaging on phones was like limited to SMS. And for the longest time, you could only, SMS like 160 characters and text only. And then, it was only through the mobile network and not on the net, and no pictures and everything, and it was severely limited. And then, you got WhatsApp, and then Apple invented iMessage, and all of a sudden you could message longer messages and over the net without cellular connection and pictures and everything. So there is a risk that every time the governments of the world start to regulate things, then, things will become more interoperable because they have to. but then, you risk the stagnation of innovation. So that's obviously the downside of the regulation. So that, then you mandate a certain standard, and that standard becomes like, general, but then that standard doesn't perhaps develop as fast as, an open market implementation would develop. So you're going to have like a much slower advancement of that technology, typically, or this is the risk at least that you have.
And clearly, I mean, if the companies don't have that much incentive to innovate anymore, if it has to be kind of in the same format for everyone, so it's obvious that that's how it's going to go.
Yeah, Pasi and I are old enough to remember the browser wars. I mean, they were standards, but every browser maker made their own extensions and thingies, and hey, you can do cooler websites if you do it like us, and then the competition browsers won't be. I mean, total BS, but that's how it was for 10 years.
But the government didn't step in. There was no government that stepped in and said that, okay, here's the HTML5 standard and you have to support this. Yeah. That was the difference. Like somebody, like the difference was like, yes, I'm also old enough to remember the browser wars very well, that the difference was that the companies themselves got together and said that, okay, enough is enough, that, we want to get rid of the proprietary extensions to all this and just,
Yeah,
but it was not without struggle. I seem to recall that there was a period.
There was
of
an industry standard, but then just it made. I'm not sure if it actually made business sense, but anyways, businesses made the decision that we'll do some proprietary things and try to outmaneuver the competition.
And now in the what do you want to call it, the Twitter-like com space, like there is this concerted effort to try to build a standard for that kind of content, but. I'm not sure if that's going to fly. Like, I think the jury is still out. If the majors, like if Meta and with their threads, if they actually join the Fed space, and make the content actually shareable easily between all the clients, and perhaps that could fly. Perhaps that would become the standard.
Yeah, I do have a 10-minute Petsakucha presentation on YouTube made 10 years ago where I made some bold predictions. One of the predictions was interoperability of instant messaging. So that's one of the predictions that hasn't happened yet, but not due to technical limitations, but rather companies just don't want to do it. But yeah, I mean, that's with any regulation, that's of course the sort of the problem is that incumbent companies will just do whatever they can to mess with. I mean, everybody's favorite GDPR is a good example of it. I mean, a lot of in the story about the intent of GDPR was that it would make it worthwhile to start developing privacy technology. So, for example, like this AI agent that would actually protect your privacy and provide services, and that was the goal. But then, essentially, American companies made it as cumbersome as possible to reject cookies, and American companies made their privacy policies as well as American as they can do. I do remember back in the first year of GDPR, I remember one Finnish dairy company had their privacy policy on the milk carton. It was like 7 sentences in Savon Murre or something like that, and that was totally valid. I mean, that would fly legally. That was totally okay. But since the American companies do 60 pages of thingy, then everybody in Europe follows, and now we're in a mess where most companies don't know how to do privacy like in a consumer-friendly way.
But I got to tell you, I hate the cookie approval banners. I just detest those. Like, I think that's one of the worst results of regulation, worldwide ever, since the dawn of the internet. First of all, I'm again in the minority. I always accept the cookies because I can't be bothered. It's just.
You're in the majority,
really?
I think most people do not care about they don't understand what's the point of it.
Based on our data, it's more like 50-50, or perhaps it's 70-30. But
you have a select clientele, I think.
But anyhow, like I would be happy if there was just a tool that allowed me to just approve the cookies on every website, so that because I'm doing that, like everybody, like how many times a day do we approve the cookies? Like at least 50 or 100. Like it's insane.
There's no reason why it should be like that. I mean, probably the vision was that our browsers would have these built in, and you can just set in your browsers that I'm happy to share everything except perhaps these two details, or I want to minimize everything. There's actually plugins now for browsers that will actually do this. They will reject like 90% or accept 90% of cookie banners automatically. There's room for innovation there. Yeah. And there's at least one customer who wants that. So.
N of one. Yeah.
And with data privacy concerns, regulation changes, mental health challenges, deepfakes, filter bubbles, and the rise in AI-generated content, many factors could shape the future of social media. How do you envision social media evolving in the coming years?
I guess we touched upon it a bit. I think one maybe interesting trend Facebook is right now, to my understanding, in some geographic areas experimenting with AI-generated content because people aren't posting enough on Facebook. So now AI is sort of, well, these are posts that your friends could possibly do, and then they do it, and that sort of keeps people engaged. And that's, in so many ways, very strange.
I feel that many people are actually switching off some social media because of the AI-generated content.
Yeah, I know many people who are trying to limit or have limited. I deleted the X app from my phone. I decided that I don't want to be part of that group that, hangs around there, especially after the US election. But with regards to the AI content, I think that's a very, many of the issues that you asked about are very hard and very thorny. Like the AI-generated content issue, if the question is that how can we differentiate in the future, from what is AI-generated and what is not, I don't think we are going to be able to. I think, we're going to be, this might sound cynical, but I think we're going to be living in a world where there's not going to be any practical way to know, for example, what pictures or video content are AI-generated and what. The progress is so rapid, and I don't know what that's gonna do to us as a society when you literally won't be able to trust anything you see on the internet anymore, because that used to be the kind of the punchline. This used to be the joke, or kind of half seriously said that it's from the internet, you can't trust that, and that's a fake, and fake news and whatnot.
Or send me a picture or I won't believe you.
Yeah. Pic or didn't happen.
Yeah.
And now it's even if you send a pic, in a year,
it still didn't happen.
It still didn't happen, or it might have not happened. Yeah. And unfortunately, I think that's just going to fuel more the atmosphere of conspiracy theories and people believing in their own facts. I remember, back in the early days of the net, somewhere, at the turn of the millennium, I was sitting in the office of my first company. I was seeing it, because the net was new. It was 5, 6, 7 years in of, the web. And I was thinking, what's going to happen once this gets really, popular, that everybody's going to start doing it. And, when information dissemination is going to become really rapid. And I had this thought that, I felt that, I want to believe that this will actually create a world where facts and information is going to be more rapidly spreading, and people are going to be more trusting of each other because they'll learn more about each other.
Such a beautiful thought.
Yeah, wasn't it? And I 20 years later, I can't believe how naive I was, because it turned out that the exact opposite happened. That the net allowed basically everyone to create their own bubble of truth, where you don't need to leave your bubble anymore, that you can just consume the news that you believe in.
And enforced by algorithms.
Yes, and then the more you dive into the rabbit hole, then, the more content there is, down there. And I think that's a huge problem. I don't know of any practical solution to that problem right now.
And there has been a lot of these kind of the big social media giants have been introducing these tags that they analyze the data or the images if they're generated by the AI. But at least on Facebook, I think it's already quite a sort of a big issue that there's so much AI generated content. And then especially people in older generations kind of really going for those really 100% trusting what they see, and then the images might just be AI generated as well. So that will definitely be a problem, a much bigger problem in the future.
Again, nothing that hasn't happened before. It's the history of media is revealing. I mean, Gutenberg's printing press, everybody says, yes, well, we did a lot of Bibles then, but no, people did like what we would now call, weird people doing self-publications, doing crap and doing conspiracy theories. Those have been done for centuries. Whenever a new medium gets invented, that's what it just sort of get lies and fiction and fantasy and misdirection get more speed out of that. Yet you do get facts as well, but they're always sort of lagging behind.
Really, the reason, or the challenge that we have right now is that the bubble is so tight that, whereas back in the day you would still be living in a normal society most of the time, but now it's possible for you to live in that kind of bubble most of the time, especially with remote work and people spending more time on their own and on just the computer and working from home and all that. So you can actually live in that world.
And having relationships with AI.
And basically you live, with your phone. You just, interact with your phone. But I agree with the historical perspective. And I actually think, I'm not pro-regulation as a general rule, but I actually think that this is one area where regulation might be beneficial. That, I foresee that most likely in the very near future, we're going to see some governmental and or, market-driven common rules agreed on basically labeling AI-generated content, or otherwise labeling non-AI generated content, that this is certified, real or something.
Rare, handcrafted by a human.
I already saw somebody did a design for that kind of an icon. It was basically a silhouette of a hand. Yeah. That it would be literally a hand icon, and this is handcrafted.
Not digital media, but manual media.
Yeah, that's a good one. Manually generated media. And it might be that, that's the way to go. That instead of labeling AI generated, 98% of stuff is going to be AI generated, you label the things that are handcrafted by people. I think that's actually very likely to happen, in the next 24 months.
It sort of reminds me, just thinking for example, looking at the assembly demo competition and how they, for example, the graphics competition and so on for years, and the music competition, they actually require that the competition, whoever submits their work to be ready, that they need to have milestones, sort of drafts recorded, so that they can also show that this is how I did it. To prove that it's done by a human and not, by a prompt.
But then the question is that, and this is kind of a bigger discussion, that how much of this will matter in the end? Will it matter to consumers in the end? If it's AI generated or if you think of we've talked about news, where it's important to know if something is fact or not. But then think about music and movies and games, entertainment, which does not need to be factual, then will people care if it's AI generated or not? And, I think that, in most cases they won't. I think that, we're going to see a massive shift, in the creative industries of moving towards AI generated content. And I'm already thinking about, the effect on places like Hollywood. What are the George Clooney's and Nicole Kidman's of the world going to do when, you can use AI?
Need to be cloned.
Yeah, if you can use AI actors, then why would you pay, millions and millions of dollars to physical actors?
Yeah, fashion models are already getting unemployed.
Yeah.
It's anecdotally, just because without kids in a family, we watch movies and TV series. I can see also in my children that when we watch something from the 90s, let's say, Star Trek Next Generation, there's no fancy computer graphics and all that, but they also understand that this is real people acting in actual physical sets, and they appreciate it more. Whereas whenever we look at something, done in 2023, they expect that it needs to be flashy, blah, 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 and it's not really that impressive even. But when you have an old movie and there's actually good God, they have 500 people on the set doing something, that's impressive. So sort of, again, this manual work.
I just want to, tip my hat to you, sir, that you show Star Trek: The Next Generation to your kids. That's a big service to humanity. I love that show. I grew up on that show. And actually, that brings us back to the AI agent. Like, I grew up with specifically Star Trek: The Next Generation, and I've talked about this often, that they would talk to the computer.
Yeah.
They would talk to the ship and they would say that, okay, computer, do this and do that. And, computer, combine whatever, sensor data and combine, build a 3D model of whatever. And the computer in this female voice would always comply and do these complex tasks. And I think it's great that, we've now reached that stage where we can talk to ChatGPT and say that ChatGPT, it's just that it called a different thing, but it'll do these complex things.
Yeah,
so
although it disappoints more often than the enterprise's computer.
That's true. It doesn't know as much. But the more knowledge the agents will have, the more we're getting to a point where the sci-fi of the 80s is becoming old hat, because we've reached that stage already. So sci-fi will have to think of new stories because we've surpassed, all the stories that we've been telling each other for decades.
And generative AI models are expected to run out of human-generated data between 2026 and 32, roughly. Relying on AI-generated data for training could lead to model collapse and lower quality outputs. Do you see this as a significant issue for the future of AI? And internet as well.
Yeah, I sort of thought we already ran out of data. At least we've already used all the Finnish data, digital data there is on the internet and also in the national archives. There isn't that much more textual data available. So yeah, I don't know where this number comes from. Probably there's still stuff out there for English language and all that. But yeah, at some point we will have used all of it. I think following up on that, OpenAI's 01 model sort of showed that you don't need to build the next bigger model. You just need to make it think harder, and you get the next level of productivity. And all the other AI labs are doing the same thing. So there's other ways of getting more performance than just building bigger models, which is also good news for the creators of smaller models, like what we do in Europe with universities and research centers are building models for, let's say, for these smaller languages which aren't really commercially viable targets for these big companies. They're not going to be serving, Finnish, Swedish-speaking audiences. So those are happening within Europe, and sort of these new, like the 01 approach, those sort of show that even smaller models their performance can be extended by quite a bit.
Yeah, I'm not technical enough to answer the question of this model collapse, but I would like to answer in general, which is that whenever there's a major technical shift, there's typically always concerns that that somehow that shift will end dramatically because we will run out of whatever. Like in the 90s, there was all this talk about running out of that the net would collapse because we would run out of, IP addresses. And then we came up with IPv6. And, there's been all this talk that, in various stages of technical major waves that something will collapse. I think it's very unlikely, because typically what happens is that if there's enough commercial interest in something, then, there will be billions and billions and billions of investment money thrown into solving these issues. And right now, AI is the number one thing in the world driving technical innovation. Like last week in Slush, I watched the pitches for the Slush pitching competition, like finals.
Were there any pitches that didn't mention AI?
No, that's the thing. Everything was AI. Like it was AI serving audience X and AI serving audience Y. And I think that, what's going to happen is that the whole notion of AI is also going to, in the next 12 months, we're going to stop seeing pitches, from startups which include the word AI, because everything is going to be AI. But there's so much interest into this because the level of productivity increase, is so massive. And, basically you can get much more bang for the buck when developing applications or whatever, that I don't think that there's going to be a collapse, or if there is one, then somebody will figure out a way around that.
Another aspect, of course, is that there's increasing hunt for the remaining data, and a lot of it, of course, is in the archives of large media companies, and they are of course clamping down and looking to make deals and actually get payment. Reddit is doing that, and so on. So it's not. Yeah, I mean, it looks like less and less of the data is available for AI model builders. They actually need to license that material, and we'll see how it goes. The side effect, of course, is that it's also clamping down on things like search engine indexing or internet archiving. So lots of stuff that used to be publicly available for you and me is starting to go behind paywalls or disappear. Archives are disappearing because the companies are afraid that it's going to be used for AI training, and they want payment first.
But I think that's a very interesting trend, and I think the jury is still a bit out on that also, that, is it going to be a model where the providers of original content or the owners of original content actually get paid for, AI models being trained on their data? Like, I have very good friends in the music industry, and I have friends who are actively lobbying for this, and, we're all like, saying that, we're pro AI, we're open to all of it as long as we get paid.
Right. Yeah.
And I think that's an open question, that it might be that actually happens. It might be that, there will be mandated license fees for training AI content on copyrighted content.
Real human-made things.
Yeah, like, handcrafted things. And in that case, like, it might lead to a situation where, the power in AI actually gets consolidated into only a couple of companies who have the necessary cash, basically, to spend on this content. Having said that, at the same time, like, we're seeing all these open source LLMs coming out, which are basically, as good or even sometimes better than the commercial elements. So I'm not sure how this is going to play out. I think, we're so early into the AI revolution yet that, everything is still being figured out. But what I'm really happy about is that, this is all happening, that, we're making this big shift, because it's like the biggest shift in technical development since at least the dawn of the web, or perhaps, as I like to say that, since the invention of electricity.
Sliced bread.
Yeah. Sliced bread and, cheese sandwiches,
Yeah, the whole how do you get legally access to materials, and all of this. I mean, as a company, would you use, DALL-E to create your official photos that you or images that you use somewhere? Can you trust that there's no copyright issues there? Maybe not. There's movements there as well. I think just last month, FCAI, so essentially the Finnish AI research consortium, just noticed the news. Essentially, there was a publication of open source AI model trained on about 10,000 hours of Finnish TV and radio programs with license. So they were licensing from Kavi, and payments were made, and the model was released as an open source, openly licensed model. So there you can now do Finnish, text or speech recognition or something like that, and it's completely legal, and it's there for anyone to use. And likewise, what Silo is doing with their models, they've used the content from National Archives in Finland. That content isn't available for OpenAI or anyone else. I'm not sure if they tried to buy it, but they probably wouldn't get it. So, as you said, and probably the same is happening around Europe, that, for example, French media companies will be happy to license their archives to Mistral to build, French models, whereas they might not be sending them over to Microsoft.
Yeah. But I think in most cases, like, people are going to be happy to, license any content as long as they get paid. If somebody pays, then they're good. And again, like, I think there's so much money in this. There's so much interest in building AI that, somehow, if there's a need to commercially license the content, there will be, funding available for that. I'm pretty sure of that.
Yeah. Thank you very much for the inspiring discussion.